Now, personally, I've always been a little bit suspicious of series hybrid vehicles like this, because the idea that you can have a petrol engine in the front, an electric motor somewhere, and then they do work part-time all the time doesn't really seem like a particularly sensible move to me. I've always been a bigger fan of either full electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids, where you have a larger, more powerful motor that can do more things, where you can drive up to, say, 140 if you should so want to, like you could in a Volvo. However, I've spent 5 days with the Toyota Corolla Cross, and the fact that I've only done half a tank while averaging about 5 liters per 100 kilometers tells me that maybe it's time for me to re-examine my assumptions. And if you'd like to know more, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified every time we make a new upload. This is Malaysian Motoring, and this is our review of the Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid. Now, the thing about the Corolla Cross Hybrid is that it is ultimately just another variant on top of the Corolla Cross range. And so the differences, aesthetics at least, are very minor. So you have this blue strip here in the full LED headlights, and you have a little bit of blue accenting around the flat Toyota badge, and that is about it. In terms of the finishing around the grille, the body cladding, even the colors available for this car, it's exactly the same as the purely internal combustion version. And then extends to the sides, where you still get the same 18-inch dual-tone alloy wheels that you would get in the 1.8V. You still get the functional roof rails, a little bit of chrome around the window line, including the Corolla Cross badging back here, which I think is quite nice. And the body cladding all the way around doesn't change. The only difference, obviously, being the hybrid badge on the front fender. At the back, it's much the same story, where again you have the same bumper, the same little integrated spoiler, the only difference being the blue badging here and the hybrid badge there. Now, the bigger issue is that normally with hybrids there's some compromise in terms of practicality, and to some extent there is still here, because now you've lost a little bit of space underneath the floor. That said, however, the space on top of the floor remains to be very impressive, and you even get this boot liner if you're willing to pay a little bit extra. And as far as I'm concerned, a family of 5 could easily go away for a weekend, if not longer, while packing all their stuff in here only up to the parcel shelf line. Now, if you need more space, like when you're moving or you're trying to buy furniture from a Swedish flat pack furniture store, you can fold the rear seats flat 60/40 for added space and practicality. And it does fold completely flat, which means there's no ridge or a weird incline for you to push stuff over, which I think is quite nice. And of course, you have a full powered tailgate, and you can lock everything back here, which means it makes life pretty easy. Now, continuing that theme of simple, functional practicality is the interior. You will find things that you need and not necessarily the things that you want. So for example, you have a large infotainment system which comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, although the USB comes out of the screen, which I certainly do not like. You get a wireless charger, which is nice to have. You have your EV mode buttons here, and you have a semi-digital instrument cluster up ahead of you, which gives you all the information that you need, such as your power, for example, whether or not it's coming from the engine or from the electric batteries, and so on and so forth. And I think that all of this functions very well. And because it's a Toyota, everything is exactly where you expect it to be. If you want to manipulate the screen, the buttons are here. You want to do your adaptive cruise control nonsense, the buttons are here. Everything here is exactly how you'd expect it, which is nice. And because there are no surprises in here, it means it's one of those very easy cars for people to get used to. You can give this to anyone, or anyone could upgrade to one of these, and it'd be pretty easy and simple to get used to all the controls and just drive it around and enjoy the fuel economy. One of the nicer things that I appreciate about the car is the fact that it has this nice leather upholstery, which is obviously not the softest leather in the world. Toyota never uses the softest leather in the world, but it's decent upholstery, and you can tell that this is the sort of thing that will last quite a while. And of course, this seat is powered, which is very nice to have, although there is no memory setting, which I think is a little bit odd. The other thing that I find a bit odd is the fact that this car somehow has manual headlight leveling. Now, even though this car has automatic high beam and full LED headlights, my leveling is still manual. I just find that a little bit weird. But at least I get dual zone climate control, which is nice. Now back here, however, you can see one of the Corolla Cross's main selling points, hybrid or otherwise. The space back here is incredibly generous, and because these front seats are mounted quite high, it means that I can tuck my feet in underneath the seat in front of me. So even with this setup in my driving position, I still have plenty of knee room, and if I need extra foot room, I've got plenty of that too. That certainly helps to make up for the fact that the floor isn't really flat, which means the center passenger may have to share foot space, and if I can put my feet out in front of me like this, the passenger in the middle can put their feet in back here, which is quite nice. And the center passenger will also enjoy a nice cold crotch because there are a couple of aircon vents back here, and that crotch will also have to deal with some wires because there are some USB-A ports back here. Now, not all SUVs in this segment come with these features, and so if you're regularly carrying people at the back, you will appreciate the space and convenience features in the back of this car. In terms of practicality, there is only a pocket on the passenger's side, the rear of the passenger's seat, and you do get a bottle holder up here, although cup holders are hidden in the center armrest. You get two of them. You also get ISOFIX mounts on either end, although the ISOFIX mounts on these seats sit in like a little opening in the leather upholstery, which is not quite the easiest to locate, especially if you're dealing with a large car seat, but at least getting the car seat in will be pretty easy because these doors open quite wide. Now overall, I would definitely be quite happy to sit back here for several hours, in fact, doing a road trip if it's just 4 up. 3 abreast back here might be a little tighter, but honestly, I don't think it really is that bad, and this car certainly nails the value proposition even in this flagship hybrid model. But the thing about a hybrid is that it has a lot more to do with the way it drives and, more importantly, how little it consumes as it does so. So, shall we? So driving the Corolla Cross Hybrid is a pretty interesting experience because we've driven the Corolla Cross before. So now it's taking a very similar powertrain, although this one runs the Atkinson cycle, and sort of changing little things about it. So for starters, the power delivery in this car is actually a little bit different from what we got in the pure combustion model, and that has a lot to do with the fact that the electric motor chimes in and provides torque very early on. Because of the way this hybrid system is set up, what the electric motor does is not only provide pure electric drive for short bursts, we're talking about 3 to 5 kilometers thereabouts, but it also aims to reduce the amount of stress that the internal combustion engine is under. So for example, under heavy acceleration when you're starting from a standstill or so on, areas where an engine would have to work hard to move the car, the electric motor chimes in and either does all of the work or it'll do part of the work in order to reduce fuel consumption. And so the immediacy of the torque in this car is certainly something that you notice. The other thing that you notice is the fact that it moves, the engine kind of comes on and off, it chimes into life and goes back out again very, very seamlessly. There's no sort of juddering starting motion as you would get in, say, a start-stop motor from Produa, for lack of a better example. And as a result, you are tempted to drive this car around and really not pay much attention to the powertrain, which is certainly something that I've been doing as much as possible, because if I don't, I'll just nerd out and look and see how much power I'm taking from where at any given time, which is certainly not how one ought to be driving any car. So when you just leave it to its own devices, compared to a plug-in hybrid where you may be tempted to say, okay, I want to use EV driving here, and then I'll use internal combustion motor here to try and recharge the battery, and then I'll go back to EV driving when I say get to town or where it's heavy traffic or so on. In a hybrid like this, the idea is that you put it in drive and go, and it's supposed to be as mindless an experience as it would be in a pure internal combustion car. And doing that shows you just how good this car is, because Toyota has been running hybrid powertrains for years now. Multiple generations of Toyota vehicles have run hybrid powertrains, and as a result, this is very polished for what it is. And that is a result of all of that experience. So driving around, engine chimes in and out of life, the electric motor comes in and out, and all you know is your fuel consumption is just very low. What I did find slightly impressive is the fact that this car manages to still be quite efficient on the motorway. So normally when it comes to hybrids, at higher speed, it'll just be the internal combustion motor because that's the most efficient way to power the car. And then the electric motor on a plug-in hybrid, for example, like the Volvos I've driven in the past, tend to just sit idly by and do nothing and just be useless weight, which then stresses the engine and increases the fuel consumption. But in this car, however, it runs a little bit differently. So the electric motor is effective up to about 90 to 110 or something like that. I couldn't quite get an exact figure on that. And it'll assist the internal combustion engine even when you're cruising. So all you know is as you're driving along, suddenly the electric motor will sort of whiz into life, not that you can hear it or feel it, and all you know is again your instant fuel consumption is now markedly lower. It's just a lot of things working in the background in this car. So you're not supposed to be paying a lot of attention to it. It's just supposed to work. And work it certainly has, because not only is this car pretty nice to drive, because the ride itself is very comfortable, certainly very suitable for families, hardly inspiring at all, but then again this is a family SUV, it's hardly meant to be inspiring to drive. But all I know is I've been doing almost 400 kilometers, no, a little over 400 kilometers, and the average fuel consumption has consistently hovered between 4.2 to 5.2 liters per 100 kilometers. That is incredibly impressive for a car that is this big. Of course, car makers like Prodoar will tout that in their Myvi, and Proton will tout that in the Iris and Persona, but those are much smaller, lighter cars. This thing's got an electric motor, it's got batteries, this thing is heavy, and yet somehow, amidst all of that, it's still very efficient. And bear in mind, I've hardly been driving this like a Catholic nun. I've been driving as I normally would, as aggressively or passively as I normally would, and yet somehow it's still doing well. And that's precisely the point. See, Toyota doesn't believe that you ought to change yourself for a car should adapt to you. And as far as I'm concerned, I've done nothing to change the way I drive, and yet this car has turned out to be remarkably efficient. And that's where hybrids lie today. Of course, Honda believes things differently. They believe that in their smaller cars especially, the electric motor is the most efficient way to power the car, and so the internal combustion engine is just there to provide electricity. And whether or not that works, I guess you and I and this channel will never know. But as far as I'm concerned, this works pretty well. And it's made me wonder, could I live with a hybrid like this in daily life? And I guess to some extent, I wouldn't mind it. The only trouble is that, of course, it's not too sure about the Corolla Cross, but with certain other hybrids, some of which are from Toyota Motor Group, the batteries don't necessarily last very long. So after about 8 to 10 years thereabouts, you might have to replace the batteries. Although UMW Toyota has assured that the batteries in this car are markedly more affordable than before, and so that shouldn't be that big of a concern. And when you're driving along, the other thing that shouldn't be of much concern is safety, because this car comes fully equipped with adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, lane keep assist, and so on. And as a result, it means that it is a very competent family car. It's certainly something that I would trust to haul my family around if I had one. So what does this mean for the Corolla Cross Hybrid? Does it justify the premium over the regular Corolla Cross? And more importantly, is this the better car to buy compared to a pure internal combustion B-segment crossover? And the answer is yes on all counts. Because the Corolla Cross has always offered a bit more in terms of space and practicality, even compared to the current generation Honda HR-V. And so if you're looking for a car with outright space, then the Corolla Cross is probably likely sitting very high in your list as it is. But that said, if you're talking about hybrid versus internal combustion, the regular Corolla Cross is pretty good. Although if you're driving mostly in town and getting caught in traffic, then maybe consider the premium for the Corolla Cross Hybrid, because you'll be saving a lot in the long run. But if you want your B or B plus segment crossover to also be inspiring to drive, then unfortunately I don't think this is the car for you. Simply because this car is very comfortable, very, very comfortable. And in doing so, it's compromised a little bit in terms of driver dynamics. Although TNGA, the platform upon which this car is built upon, is very impressive, it's still not an excellent car to drive by any measure. And so if you're looking for an excellent car to drive within this segment, consider something like the Mazda CX-3 or CX-30, or indeed a Peugeot 2008 if you can sacrifice a little bit of space, and I'm sure you'll quite enjoy the fuel consumption in that car too. But in any case, that's been our review of the 2022 Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to be notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe. Jangan bodoh.